I know that you all know my next guest. He was a Broadway star, producer, and director at the age of 22. At 26, he directed what almost every film critic has had on his list of the greatest films ever made, Citizen Kane. He has continued to be a wonder ever since. Critic Alexander Wolcott once said years ago, I don't remember where he said this, there but for the grace of God goes God, speaking of Orson Welles. Would you please welcome a giant of the entertainment industry, Mr. Orson Welles. These are your people. We gave you the honor of no music on your entrance. If you had your druthers, Robert, what would you have played?
I couldn't think of anything grand enough for Mr. Welles.
Isn't that amazing?
That's the highest compliment we could pay you.
Thank you.
Gee,
I used to be chased by a theme song for years, you know.
What was it?
The Harry Lime. I'm so glad everybody forgot it.
Oh, yeah, from the Third Man.
Thank you, thank you.
We always can play what everyone's forgotten.
Next time back, yes. When Dick goes out to fix his makeup, we can fill in.
Do you worry about that? Things like how you look, and are you conscious of that when you're on television, whether your hands would be made after?
Well, I'm not on television enough for it to have worked itself up to a phobia, because the few times I've been on, I got out of town soon enough so I didn't see it on the box.
Is that so?
And that makes it possible for me to be here tonight.
Mm-hmm. That's very nice. You know, you have me scared a bit.
Not as scared as I am.
Mr. Welles called on the phone the other day, and you know that feeling that you get that it couldn't really be true, and I didn't believe that it was you on the phone for a while, and I realized that it was, and
there it is, yeah.
Yeah, and here, and one of us must be actually here at this moment.
We were talking about reality, or you were, and what it looks like, and that's the spooky thing about television, is that it is real. We're just sitting here, and that isn't like show business, is it?
No. It's supposed to be up and doing things.
Something doing, sir. Let Jack do something.
No, like Lee.
You know, if you were to ask, I think, the average person, where is Orson Welles' hometown, I have a feeling that you would get a guess that would go all over the globe, probably starting with Budapest or something.
Yeah.
And the fact that it's Kenosha, Wisconsin, is one of the most startling. That's the truth, isn't it?
That's right. I was born in Kenosha.
Do you ever go back to Kenosha?
I left when I was 3 weeks old. So my memories are limited.
Mm-hmm.
I've been back to Wisconsin a lot, and I've lived in Wisconsin, but I never made it to Kenosha.
3 weeks old?
Yeah, and I've got people who remember going to school with me there, you know. I've never been.
What, at 3 weeks, that's amazing.
Yeah, maybe 5, I don't know.
Did anyone try to talk you out of leaving at that age? Can you remember early memories way back before you could speak?
Yes, but I'm not sure it's true.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have memories that you think are real, and I'm not sure whether I saw it on, on television?
Yeah.
Of course, I'm one of the younger fellows. I remember television very well. It's the kind of thing that I have pictures of. I don't remember the dialogue. It's sort of silent movies more than of a grandmother that was dead when I was 4, things like that. But nothing very fascinating. I'd better go and make up my hands.
No, please. No. Made me feel a lot better. Are there any legends about you that you would like to scotch right now, like the fact that you, at the age of 4 months or something, wrote a thesis on Nietzsche's philosophy, or, there are all these incredible things like that.
Yeah. Pack of Lies.
Pack of Lies?
Pack of Lies.
No kidding.
Yeah. I was a rather backward student.
And I read also about you that you were supposed to go to Harvard. Mr. Lemon did go to Harvard.
That's true. I had a scholarship to go to Harvard. Hollywood is what I wanted to say. What I wanted to go to was Hollywood. What I had the scholarship for was Harvard. And I did everything I could think of not to go, including show business. The only reason I'm in show business was to keep out of school.
You're getting ready to go to Harvard.
Yeah.
Through all this, are you?
And I just didn't want to go, not because I have anything against Harvard, but I never know the answers to anything, as you found out.
We were talking upstairs. I would like to ask you one thing, though, that may be a kind of question that's a little annoying, but if someone were to give you, say, $10 million tax-free now to
Yes.
do whatever you... I'm considering it. What would you do with it?
Well, since we're on the full network, give it away. But I'll tell you afterwards, you know.
I guess what I'm angling for would be, would you make a movie? Would you produce plays?
I think really anybody is suddenly given an awful lot of money until it happens. You think you're going to go out in the street and hand it out to everybody. I'm sure I don't have enough class to do that. But until they show me that green stuff, the instinct would be, you know, some kind of giving it away with all the misery there is. But of course, the minute you've got it, you turn into somebody else, you know.
A monster.
Yeah, that's a monster.
Your dad was an inventor.
Yes.
What did he invent? Anything we would know of?
He invented a great many things, none of which worked. Some of them were very successful. He invented something called the picnic, which was a square box into which everything fitted for your outing under the trees. Which included a salt cellar which collapsed. That meant there couldn't be any salt in it. You know, things like that.
Yeah.
And the war came along, the First World War, and every American soldier had to have it in a knapsack. So, of course, my father was fabulously rich on the picnic. This useless box of toys went over there with all our boys. And then he invented one of the early airplanes. He was an automobile manufacturer. He'd raced some of the early automobiles. And in fact, a picture I made, Ambersons, is partly based on him, not by me, but by Tarkington, who wrote the book, who was a friend of my father's. And my father was a kind of mad playboy. He was well along when I was born. He was in his late 60s when I was born, so we went back to older and happier times. And when the Wright brothers came up with this thing, he said that that was a very good idea, but there was a basic fallacy, which was having the engine in the plane. Any fool could see that the airplane should be light enough and the engine should be on the ground, you see. So he built an airplane which was in effect a sort of glider. And a friend of his, it wasn't his own car, had a Stanley steamer, which was the automobile worked by steam, you know, and with big wheels that could go over rough ground. And this plane was hauled along by the Stanley steamer with one of my father's servants as the pilot. He said it wasn't time yet for him to go up. He was going to try it out on the help. So there are two pictures I have. One is everybody lined up before in front of the Stanley steamer and the glider, looking very happy. And the second one is the wreck of the airplane. With everybody lined up looking just as happy.
That airplane is now known as the Super Chief on the Long Island Railroad.
But he liked to call himself an inventor because what he came from an epoch in which you should pretend to be a great tycoon. You mustn't say you're a playboy. He was just a playboy. He inherited some money and he spent it. That was what he did. So he put down, I'm an inventor, so it would be respectable. And these fantasies came up through the years. He was also a very lucky gambler. He really broke the bank at Monte Carlo. And he lost money all the time in business and made it up gambling, which is an interesting switch.
Yes, it is.
And in fact, it was in Kenosha where he was manufacturing some mysterious object that I happened to come into the world.
That's me. Can you hold on for just a moment? Could we at some point in this evening, although I know it's the one subject you always have thrown at you, talk a little bit about Citizen Kane?
Well, sure. I guess.
Okay. If you've got dandruff. Could you direct me in how to make this transition gracefully? If you've got dandruff that you can't seem to get rid of, watch this from Tegrin Medicated Shampoo. Ba-dum-bum. Bop. Oh, it's us. Does this medium intrigue you, television? Would you like to?
Oh, yes.
Does it?
Well, I expected, you know, I'd done an awful lot of radio and theater and movies and everything, so when the television scene began, I said, just wait, you know. And I stayed near the telephone. But for 15 years, it didn't ring, so, from Madison Avenue. So it's just now I've started into it. They're giving me a special on CBS. Mike Dan has given me you know, the kind of contract for a television that I only had once in movies, but it took an awful long time for the phone to ring. But it intrigues me. I think it's just the great, great medium, but it also mystifies me. Doesn't it you?
Yes. Yes, often.
Even though you're a master of it, don't you really think there's something we haven't figured out yet?
What?
Well, you are.
Where would a person reach you, though? How would they know where your telephone is? I think of you as a citizen of the globe. You're photographed one day in Spain and another day you're in Luxembourg.
Process. Back projection.
You're really... That's a little
I'm
inside.
really in Kenosha all the time.
All the time you're in Wisconsin? How would a person get a letter to Orson Welles is something that once intrigued me for a long time. And I often wonder, I really do, I think about you a great deal, and I often wonder what you're doing after I wake up, and I wonder what Orson Welles is doing today. Does this...
Well, he's watching you if he's anywhere in America. How about that?
Wait a minute.
You're not very big in Budapest, Jim. But that's coming.
I see. You know, a lot of, well, I guess all the young people in this country, you sometimes get the feeling, are film happy. Someone once said about this generation, they would rather make film than make love. And of course, you are one of their great heroes.
You know, the thing is, there doesn't seem to be anybody who wants to go to movies anymore. Just make them. In the young generation, isn't that true?
It is true. You know, can I interrupt for just 10 seconds?
Please do.
But at any rate, Orson, I assume maybe you heard this or maybe you didn't, but I know it is a fact that Catch-22 was recently sneak previewed in Boston.
Yeah.
And when Orson said all of the young kids really want to make films and so forth, only 50 students were told that it was Catch-22, and by the time 8 o'clock in the evening came along, there was such a mob, they had to run it twice, back to back. 90% of the audience were young, bright college students.
Really? That's good news.
Now, when your name came on the screen, there was a standing ovation. The biggest of all, including the director and the rest of the cast and everything. But when the name Orson Welles came on from this young generation, the whole place fell apart. I don't know whether you had heard that.
I didn't know that.
True.
Isn't that wonderful news?
This gives me faith, you see, that our industry will
eventually... The point is, that was in Boston, and that's a new generation, because I used to open shows there, and that was a different generation that I opened to, believe me.
You had trouble in Boston?
In Boston. The worst thing that ever happened to me, can I tell this?
Of course, you're not here every night.
Even with the white hands?
Oh, please, please.
This was for a show I did with the Theater Guild and the Mercury together, which is called Five Kings, which was an adaptation of several of the Shakespearean histories. And we had the big scene where Henry V says, "Cry God for Harry, England and St. George," and I had a tremendous stage set with 50 extras, all with bows and arrows. And when he says that, we shot off a cannon, and they all shot the real arrows across the stage, and that was the end of that scene. Big effect. Opening night in Boston, we had a revolving stage, which slowly started to turn around. So that they all, now this is all Harvard boys, all your men, dressed as archers, and they're all facing front. I wasn't in the scene. I was standing in the wings, and I thought to myself, they're Harvard men. They know better than to shoot into the audience. They're not going to do that, you know. And he says, "Cry God for Harry, England, and St. George," and all 50 of them, right out into the audience. We didn't miss a critic.
They got their money's worth that night. And after this message from our local stations, we'll be right back. Stay with us. If you just joined us, I'm talking with Orson Welles and Jack Lemmon, should none of us be familiar to you. Can you talk to this generation? Can you communicate with your daughter? Do you feel cut off from the young generation?
Well, I keep talking. Whether I'm heard is another question. I don't feel any embarrassment. I hear all about this great problem. And I think that gap is partly a generation one and partly a point of view gap. You know? I think it's the way you look at things that divides you from the kids more than the years. But maybe I'm just whistling in the dark about that, but it's the way I feel about it. Anyway, I was a kind of a middle-aged gentleman when I was 15, in a way, you know, because I pretended to be 25 when I was that age to, you know, to match my voice.
How does a 15-year-old assume a 25-year-old manner?
Well, he gets hooked on cigars and he lies a lot.
Those are mannerisms we associate with 50-year-old people.
Well, that's it. So I came on with that, and I never was young. And so then I started practicing being young as I got older. So maybe I just don't notice it because I've never been around the gaps long enough, you know.
Would you recommend the kind of childhood you had where you were taken all over the world?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. I think that's what a lot of dropping out is about, people who'd like to be as lucky as I was.
Yeah, I think your life is so appealing.
Just luck, that's all. Yeah, that's what you were talking about. I wasn't smart about travel. I was just dragged around and taken to see shows and even nightclubs where children aren't supposed to be and everything. And people used to say, oh, that'll spoil it for you. When you grow up, you'll think you've seen it all. Not a bit of it, you know. Not a bit of it.
You know, the one time I saw you in person was on stage in King Lear at the City Center. And I had not read the papers that day, and I had bought tickets, and I went to see it, and just before the house lights went down, and a voice came over and said something to the effect that of all the tragedies that befell King Lear, one of them was not breaking one ankle and spraining the other one, and you appeared and did the whole thing in a wheelchair.
That's right.
How does one manage to do both ankles?
Well, I'm pretty good at it.
Yeah.
I'd sprained one just before the opening. And halfway through the opening, I broke the other. You know, they always say break a leg, you know, that's meaning good luck. And I had it.
Somebody said...
But it's all right, the King Lear in a wheelchair. It sort of adds to the pity of it all, I guess. It's comfortable. You get to sit down, you know. In Shakespeare, you never get to sit down, normally. If you analyze it, go and see Shakespeare in plays, nobody ever gets to sit down. So if you've got an excuse, like a broken leg, you're the, you know, you've got the best part, because that wheelchair is marvelous. It's a long, long play, and I have flat feet.
How do you feel about psychoanalysis?
Oh, I'm against it.
Are you?
Yeah.
I would be interested in, if you would ever go into it, I would love to have a transcript of what is said, because it seems to me that your life is so fascinating, what's seen, that what is unseen must be just fantastic.
But I don't think that you get to the unseen with analysis. I think analysis is just another form of talk show. You know. I prefer this scene to the couch. I really do. I think it does do a lot of good for some people, but for a lot of people, it's just an excuse to talk about themselves at high rates. You know, and I'm awful tired of the language of psychoanalysis, you know.
The jargon?
Oh, that jargon, you know, you can't say anything. You can't say you know, I got spooked a minute there. I thought I saw you, and it turned out to be the coat hanger. And they've got a big thing about that, you know, and coat hangers right away. You know what they go into. Yeah. And it's very limiting. I hate jargon anyway, whether it's political or psychoanalytical or anything, because it's a sort of a substitute for conversation. It's a real communications breakdown when you can only talk in slogans.
Do you believe in any sort of the occult, clairvoyancy, or any of those things?
I don't want to. I don't want to. I've had enough experiences so that I can't say that there isn't such a thing. Little odd things
like
that
what?
happened to me. None of them very dramatic, but I don't think it's right. I hope it isn't I hope it isn't true.
What sort of thing has happened to you?
Oh, you know, I've a couple of times I've kind of got a hunch about what's going to happen. Not about myself, but about somebody else. Things like that. And I'm against it. I think that it's too... I think there is some sort of a force, but it's kind of what electricity was before Franklin flew that kite. It's something that sparkles when you rub a fur coat the wrong way. It's nothing more than that, and it's probably a great powerhouse somewhere that can be tapped. But until it is, it's in the hands of dangerous people who can greatly influence your life by what they say, and to your harm.
And you have predicted a couple of things that came true?
Yes, but I don't want to come on and do that scene because I'm against people who do it. I think the best thing in the world, the best thing we have in life is the ability to choose. The act of choice and decision is freedom. And I think occultism, as practiced by swamis and all of this kind of thing, and the stars and all of that, may limit us in our choice or inhibit us. And anything that does that, I'm against.
That's interesting. You once did it sort of as semi-seriously, didn't you? As a
yes, but it's all a kind of a side of magic. You're a magic. If I know you are, I saw you once at some kind of magic club or something.
Yeah.
I think we're all sort of terrible magicians here tonight.
A lot of, yes, we all illustrated magicians. When we come back, we will be back, as a matter of fact, after this message from our local station. Mr. Wells, I apologize.
Please, Orson, please.
Oh.
Don't call me. Yes, my goodness.
All right.
Yeah. I must say, though, that there is a thing about calling you by your first name, which is done by people whose last names you don't know, that rather bewilders me. Have you ever had that happen?
No.
In show business, in movies, we get it all the time. You know, the second assistant director to whom you haven't been introduced to always calls you by your first name. And I had one meet me at the airport for a plane this year, and he said, "Hi, Orson, glad to see you." And he turned to the porter and said, "Sir, do you mind taking these bags?"
Curious. When you were out there, I've always wanted to know the answer to this. You always hear that when you were 26 years old and you made Citizen Kane, and they said, you can't do these things. You can't have the background in focus or whatever it was, or you can't shoot a scene that way, Mr. Wells, or young Mr. Wells, or Orson, or whatever they called you then. And you knew that you could. And how did you know this?
Because I didn't know any better, and it's very much in the line with what Jack was saying earlier in the show. It comes from just, you know, sheer dumbness. You're sure it's got to be you're good and you're great. It's ignorance. There's no authority in the world like it.
But there's got to be something more than that technically. I mean, how did you know that...
You know technically that the whole bag of movies can be learned in about a day and a half. I kid you not.
Now, how does it work? How do you do it? You get a guy who knows how to...
And then ask him, and that's the end of it. It isn't much harder than taking home movies. It's just about 3 points harder. Mm-hmm. And all these guys who do it try to make a big mystery of it because that's their living. Mm-hmm. And I have the right to say it because I had in my first picture in Kane the greatest cameraman who ever lived, who was Greg Toland. And he came to my office and said, "I want to work in your picture. My name is Toland." And I said, "Why do you, Mr. Toland?" He said, "Because you've never made a picture. And you don't know what cannot be done."
Gee.
And so I said, "But I really don't. Can you tell me?" He says, "There's nothing to it." And he gave me the day and a half lessons. And he was right.
Showed you how the camera works.
That's right. There's nothing to do. And so we had the day and a half, and there it was. But the only thing was I'd been directing in the theater for years, and nowadays they have lighting people. We did then, and I had some of the greatest lighting people, in fact, in the theater, but many of the shows I lit myself, and I was supervised it, and I thought a director did that in a movie. So for the first 10 days, I was moving the lights around, you see. And Toland was behind me, fixing it up and changing the readings and saying, "Shut up, let him go on. I want to see what he's up to," which was very chic of him, I think. And then somebody told me, and then I went and got on my knees and apologized and everything. I thought that's what the directors did. Mm-hmm. Because if you see a picture by Ford, for example, you were speaking of Jack Ford earlier, he's had, must be 100 cameramen in his long career. And almost every Ford picture you can tell from the look of it.
That it's
a Ford picture, just from the physical look of it. His signature is on it, you know.
Now, when every list of great films, of course, many of them lead with Citizen Kane and say it's the finest film made. Do you agree?
No, certainly not.
That's
My next one is, though. That's the...
The Magnificent Amberson.
No, the next. No, not the one after that. The one I'm preparing at this moment.
Oh, the next one.
That's going to make history.
Could you give us the title of that?
I haven't decided what it is yet.
Oh. I see. Now, could I just check one other thing with you? Is it true that the Hearsts tried to actually have the film destroyed before it was...
They tried to have it destroyed. They even tried to frame me. In one town, I was doing some kind of date, I don't know what, bond tour or lecture, some kind of a gig, and I was in a nightclub afterwards, waiting to go back to my hotel, have a little supper, and waiter came up and says, a police officer wants to see you. Well, I tried to hide, because if that ever happens, I'm sure I'm guilty. I don't know how you are about it, but, you know,
absolutely.
The minute I see a cop, I know I did it. But there was no way out of it. I had to go see him, and he took me aside, and he said, Orson, I don't know why they always call me Orson. He says, don't go back to your hotel room.
Yeah.
I said, why? He says, they've got a miner staked out there and a photographer.
A lady?
Luckily, a lady, I think. I prefer to tell it that way.
Oh, no, I meant ER as opposed to OR. I'm sorry. Sorry.
And they were going to frame me. I would have been in jail if were the cops waiting to jump in and arrest me. That was not Mr. Hearst itself. It was somebody in that town who thought he'd get in good with the boss by
doing a favor.
By doing a favor.
Yeah.
I don't think Hearst would have stooped to that.
Would you change?
Although I did have a conversation with him about the picture,
yeah,
which was in an elevator in San Francisco the night it opened. We found ourselves going up together. And he'd known my father. I'd never met him, you know. And I introduced myself. Things you'll do when you're young, you know. And I said, would you like to come to the opening tonight? And he didn't answer, and I said, well, Mr. Kane would have come. And that's the difference between the two people, because the character of Charles Foster Kane had enough class to have gone to the opening. But he just, he was very uptight, that was the end of that. It wasn't really about him, it was made up of a lot of people, that's the truth.
What's the last time you saw it?
I saw it, that opening in San Francisco, and I snuck out right after it started. I've never seen a picture of mine after I finished it.
You haven't seen Citizen Kane in all these years?
No picture I've ever made, except as an actor, but never seen a picture I've directed.
Only once?
Yeah, well, 1,000 times in the cutting room.
Yeah, but why wouldn't you want to see it now?
Because I like to sit here and think how good it must have been, you know.
Is there any chance that you would change any of it or do any of it again?
Of course, everything. You'd want to change everything, I think. You know, don't you want to change things after you've done them? And a movie can't be changed. No, that was the whole thing. And I like to think, oh, yes, and all those great pictures, and I know if I saw them, all confidence would go.
Oh, gosh. Well, we have a message, and we'll be right back. Do you find that same thing, Jack, that you don't like to see your films?
Yeah, I fully understand it. Not now. I would speak only, you know, as an actor.
But you're going to direct one now,
but
aren't you?
Yes. I was so delighted to hear you give me that day and a half bit. I can't wait to get a cameraman, work for a day and a half. I got the rest of the summer off until I shoot it in the fall.
That's right.
Make it sound easy.
Because I'm petrified. I'm scared to death, but I think you should be, actually.
You bet.
Or, you know, if I was at all blasé about it, I doubt that I'd be any good. I'm not sure anyhow. But it's true, because I know that in films, once I have done them and seen it once, that each time, if I do happen to see it, I just see more wrong, you know, and so I try not to, even when they come back and haunt me on television, you know.
Makes sense.
I don't.
But there are the ones who sit and just run it over and over again, you know?
Just think they're wonderful.
Yes, I just think they're wonderful.
Yeah. Are you making a movie? There is a story that you have been making a movie for a long time about Don Quixote.
It's a home movie.
It is?
It really is. Because every time I get a little loot, you know, I run and do another sequence. It's a picaresque novel that, you know, you can do bit by bit. And I have this old actor, and I better hurry up, though. He's getting on. Playing Quixote, and I, you know, dig him up, and we grind out another bit. A minute, there's a little more bread around. But I confidently expect to have it out before the end of the century.
We can count on
Yes, you can count on
We're
that,
going to hold
yes,
you to that.
That's right.
Is
And
it true?
I'll be glad to run it all the time after that.
Again,
Yeah.
okay, we'll hold you to. Is it true that you were the voice of the Shadow
You
originally?
bet I was.
That's true?
You bet. And what a welcome
can you-
$85 a week that was.
Can you remember the words?
What is it? Now, who knows what evil lurks in the hearts of men? The shadow knows crime does not pay. And then that laugh, you remember?
Yeah.
All the kids in America could do it better than I could.
I just got,
Yes, you know.
I just got a few goose pimples as you did that.
But it was great, and I didn't know how it ended, you know.
Yeah.
Because part of the deal was I was very busy running the theater, was that I wouldn't have to rehearse. So I would just come on, they'd hand me the script, I'd go on the air, and they'd get me into this pit with the cobras or whatever it is, and then my secretary, played by Agnes Moorehead, would break in and say, Lamont, or something, you know, and I'd come out. It was always a big surprise to me how I had the whole thing solved. It added interest as far as I was concerned.
Yes, it would. Where were you when you realized the effect that the Mars broadcast, the War of the Worlds, had had on people?
In the studio when the cops came in. They didn't know who to arrest, but they'd been sent in, you know. And they had that expression that we've come to know and understand so well. And, they weren't as well organized back then for the Martians. They've got it under control now, I think, a little better.
Didn't it ever occur to anyone that intelligent beings who were intelligent enough to perfect all of the mechanisms and things to get to this planet would be very unlikely to land in New Jersey? I would have thought.
You know what? Wolcott sent me a wire, Alex Wolcott. There was a, you know, I was against Bergen.
You were opposite him
I
on
was
radio?
opposite Bergen. He was on the other network.
Yeah.
And Wolcott sent me a wire that said, this only goes to prove, my beamish boy, that all intelligent people are listening to Bergen.
And that man was a friend of yours.
Yes.
Yeah. Gee, I don't know how much time I have left, and there's so many things I would love to talk to you about. Are you still a bullfight fan?
Yes, I'm still not as keen, but it's a big thing to get into. You know, you always have to explain it and everything.
Yeah, yeah.
And I don't have the pigtail on. You know, I'm not ready for it.
Let me ask you, I must ask you, what film directors do you admire?
Well, I think the one we mentioned is as good a fellow to start off with as there is, Jack Ford.
Uh-huh.
In America, and I would say the greatest maybe of all time is Renoir.
Renoir.
You know, when they talk about greatest pictures of all time, he made 5 of them.
Mm-hmm.
Minimum.
Is there anyone you'd like to meet that you haven't? People would love to meet you.
Yeah, I would.
Anyone,
there's so many
is there
people
anyone you
I'd
want
like
to
to
meet?
So many people I'd like to meet. Some of them aren't very popular. You know, like I'd like to meet Mao. Not because I'm a fan, but, you know, what's he like? And I don't know, God, almost everybody I don't know I'd like to meet. I wish I had a good answer for that. Jack, who would you like to meet?
I don't know. I was fascinated by your answer because it's such an intelligent one, and it also means that you have such an interest and a capacity for everything in life, which is part of your genius, I think. And I can fully understand what you mean. I think that you would like to spend 100 years meeting people because people fascinate you.
And those way out people too, you know, and great leaders, you know. Some of them frauds and some of them not, that you don't get to meet except in some silly capacity. And then all these great people that never get to be anything, because as Jack was saying earlier in the show, and how I agree with him, that if you have talent, it will out. That isn't true at all. You can have all the talent in the world and never get anywhere. And I like to meet those people who didn't get anywhere. I know quite a lot of them. And they're fascinating too.
Can you enjoy a movie when you go to it? Can you sit and be carried away by it?
Not as much as I would like to be, because before I made movies, I liked them more. Now I have a little thing where I see a ghost of that slate in front of a scene a little bit. I don't believe it as much as I did before. I enjoy them, but I don't have that perfect suspension of belief that I had as an innocent movie fan. And now I'm saying, you know, there's Jack, and I like him better in this one and all that. It's very hard for me not to completely take away my friends who were in it and how they did that. And it's very hard for me to turn all those things off and enjoy it as you ought to.
Yeah, I would think that making movies would kind of spoil them for you in a sense.
To some extent, don't you think?
Yes, yeah. You become more and more aware of the technique that the director is using.
And
you're
people you
interested in.
know and all that, there they are, you know. It's hard not to put those things into it. But I'm a pretty good movie fan.
Still go.
Oh, yes, and love them still, when they're great.
We have a message. That's one of the problems you don't have in movies. After this brief message, we will return to the message. There's a bit of the Third Man theme. It's haunting you yet.
Thank you, sir.
We only have a very little bit of time left. Jack, your film is called The Out-of-Towners.
Right.
Yeah.
Can I see it?
Sure.
Is it opening
I'd
soon?
be delighted. I don't want to be with you because I'm petrified of what you might think. Yes, it's opening May 28th at the Music Hall.
Good. And please get Don Quixote out before 2000, will you?
You
The year
bet I
2000.
will. It'll be at the Music Hall, too.
Oh, good. Thank you both for being here. Thank you. We'll see you tomorrow night, and good night.
WA 747, the ultimate in comfort and elegance. Wide aisles, oversized seats, meals on request, and your choice of movies. Somehow you feel more important on TWA. Fred Foy speaking. Good night.